Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little older. Not older like grandma's dusty photo album, but older like obsidian knives, living gods, and cities floating on lakes. You're waking up in Tenochtitlan, capital of the Aztec Empire. Congratulations, you are alive. And that alone is a miracle. The year is roughly 1490, give or take a Spanish invasion. You don't know it yet, but your people call this place the Billy Button of the Moon. And right now, your Billy Button is stuck to a sweat-soaked mat in a clay house the size of your bathroom. No AC, no fan, just heat, humidity, and the faint smell of maize, charcoal, and damp feathers. Your eyelids flutter open as a distant drum beat echoes through the dawn air. Boom, dot dot dot, boom, dot dot, boom. Not war yet, just the morning rhythm. Birds caw overhead. Somewhere, a conch shell blasts. Time to rise, warrior. You stretch, slowly. Your back aches from sleeping on tightly woven reeds. Your body is wrapped in a light cotton tunic. You're lucky enough to have one. It sticks to you like a second layer of skin. No buttons, no seams, no modesty, and certainly no deodorant. You smell like wood smoke and river sweat. That's normal. Your home is simple. Clay floor, bamboo walls, one door, no windows. Light seeps in through cracks in the roof. It's not much, but it's yours. Well, technically it's the emperor's, and you're just borrowing it while staying alive. Try not to get sacrificed, and you can keep it another week. You rise to your feet, carefully, because the floor is covered in scattered obsidian flakes, discarded from last night's blade-sharpening ritual. One wrong step, and boom, bloody toe. Not an uncommon morning. There's no toothbrush, but there is a twig. You chew the end until it frays, then run it across your teeth. It tastes like dirt and mint. You spit into a clay bowl, and your little brother promptly knocks it over. Classic. Outside, Tenochtitlan hums with life. Chinampas floating gardens stretch across the lake like checkerboards. The smell of roasting peppers and burning copal resin drifts through the air. Canoes drift between homes. The city is alive. So are the gods, and they're always watching. Your neighbor greets you with a nod and a muttered prayer. You nod back, but not too enthusiastically. He might be your uncle, or a spy, or both. Aztec politics are complicated. You glance up at the great temple. Templo Mayor towers in the distance, its twin shrines catching the rising sun. You can already see priests climbing the stairs. One carries a bundle. You try not to imagine what's inside. You head to the central courtyard to join your Kamakaktet's Aztec warrior school. It's not for math. It's for marching, chanting, and throwing spears the size of tree branches. Your feet are bare. Your legs ache. Your stomach growls. It's going to be a long day. But first, you pass by a small altar. You must stop. You always stop, even if you're late. You bow your head, whisper a chant, and smear a tiny bit of your blood, just a prick from your earlobe onto the stone. Why? Because the gods demand it. You don't argue with gods who have hundreds of names and drink blood like tea. Breakfast. Don't get your hopes up. Your family offers you a tortilla, slightly burned, and a dab of chili paste. No eggs, no chocolatin, unless you're a noble, and you're not. You're a soon-to-be human offering, with good footwork. You chew slowly, savoring the spice. It burns your tongue, but keeps the hunger quiet for a while. Your mother hands you a cup of warm Atola cornmeal mush in liquid form. It's thick, gritty, and comforting. You nod in thanks. She nods back, knowing this might be your last meal. Every day feels like that here, as you head toward your warrior training ground. You hear more drums. Not the morning ones. These are sharper, faster. Someone, somewhere, is being sacrificed. You don't flinch. It's part of life. You think about the gods again. So many names, so many faces. and each one demands something different. Rain, war, maize, sun, blood. The sun god, Huitzilopochtli, demands a lot. Especially blood. Especially from warriors. Especially from you. You wonder what kind of death you'll have. Will it be glorious? Will it be in battle? Will your heart still be beating when it's held up to the sky? You shake off the thought. That's for tomorrow. Today, you train. You grip your Makua-Wheatla wooden club embedded with obsidian blades. It's heavy, sharp, prone to chipping. Like your morale, you spar with another boy. You're both 13. You both have scars. You both laugh after one of you falls. The instructor doesn't laugh. He hurls a rock at you both and tells you to do better. Classic Aztec encouragement. The sun climbs higher. The heat becomes unbearable. You squint, sweat, and try not to faint. Water. You sip from a communal gourd that tastes like 10 other people's mouths. Yum. You make it through the drills. Barely. Your body is sore, but your spirit, still intact. That's worth something. At noon, you're allowed a short break. You collapse. Into the shade of a cactus. Literally. You rest against a cactus. Why? Because there are no chairs in Aztec life. Only rocks, mats, or your own legs. You close your eyes. You dream for a moment. Maybe of cool rivers or mangoes. Maybe of peace. Then you're shaken awake. Time for a ritual dance. Yes, now. No. You can't sit this one out. The gods are watching. The afternoon melts into golden haze. Your feet are blistered. Your hands are calloused. Your mind is full of chants you barely understand. And yet, you keep moving. Because stopping means falling. And falling means weakness. And weakness means selection. When the sun begins to set, you head home. The streets are crowded. Children chase turkeys. Merchants shout over piles of dried fish and chili. The canals shimmer with light. You arrive. To find your hammock broken. Your little sister used it for a game involving rocks and gravity. No one seems sorry. You sigh, curl up on a straw mat, and breathe in the evening smoke. It smells like roasted corn and ash. You survived today. Not everyone did, but you'll need your strength. Because tomorrow, you march east, to the jungle, to war, to glory, or to the top of the temple. You wake up sore. That's normal. If you don't feel like your spine was folded and stored under a grinding stone, you probably didn't train hard enough yesterday. The sun isn't up yet, but the air already clings to your skin like wet cloth. The city outside your hut is still quiet, except for the faint whistle of wind through obsidian blades and the occasional cough from a neighbor who inhaled too much cooking smoke last night. Tenochtitlan may be beautiful, but it's not breathable. You stretch and hear your knees crack like dry maize husks. You're only 14, but your joints argue like a man of 40. Today is your second full year in the Comicac, the Aztec Warrior Academy. There are no report cards, no grades, and certainly no recess. You either get better or you get offered on an altar. You quickly splash your face with water from a clay jar. It's slightly warm and smells faintly of moss and dust. It's the closest thing you'll get to a spa treatment. You rub it into your neck, trying to scrub off yesterday's layer of training grime. Spoiler, it's now just 2 layers. Outside, your instructor waits. His name is Kotel, which means snake. You're not sure if that's a nickname or an omen. He's as lean as a jaguar and twice as moody. His favorite words are, again, faster, and you bleed too easily. You join the others in the courtyard. The sky is now glowing orange, and the smell of burning copal is heavy in the air. It's meant to purify the spirit. Mostly, it just makes your eyes sting. Today's first exercise is endurance, which is a fancy way of saying, run until someone throws up. The path goes from the training ground to the temple base and back. 7 times. Uphill both ways. Barefoot by lap 3. Your feet are raw. By lap 6, your tongue is hanging out. By lap 7, your friend Tleka, is vomiting into a cactus. Again, classic Tlaka. There's no water break, just an encouraging slap on the back and a cheerful, "The gods are watching." Next, it's weapon drills. You're handed a Again, the wooden club with obsidian blades still makes you nervous. Every swing feels like handling a lawnmower made of glass. One wrong move, and you'll be sacrificing your own fingers. You square off with Chamali, the biggest student in the Kamikaze. He's built like a wall, and smells like one too. The first time he charges at you, you dodge. The second time you stumble. The third time, you black out for a few seconds, but pretend you didn't. Kotel doesn't shout, he just raises one eyebrow. You'd rather he shouted. After drills, it's formation practice. You're learning to march in perfect rows, because Aztec warfare is more ballet than brawl. Precision matters. Why? Because battles aren't just for winning, they're for capturing prisoners. Killing the enemy is easy, capturing them for sacrifice. Now that's skill. You learn to aim for the legs, to trip, to tire, to taunt. You don't stab to kill, you stab to catch. It's like a sport, with slightly higher stakes. Break time is declared, but it's a trap. It's just time for ritual chants. You form a circle with the others, your voices rising in rough unison. The words honor, Tezcatlipoca, the god of fate and night. The god who sees everything even when you mess up the lyrics. You chant louder. Afterward, you're allowed to eat. Well, snack. One cold tortilla, one pinch of crushed cacao beans, one roasted beetle. You choose slowly. You do not complain. Chamali once complained. He was chosen for a mock sacrifice. He still walks funny. The midday sun beats down now. No shade, no mercy, just more drills. Your muscles ache, your stomach grumbles, and your mouth is dry. You ask for water. Coatl hands you a gourd filled with what smells like river mud and yesterday's sweat. You drink it anyway. It might be sacred. Afternoon training begins with shield work. You hold your chamalier circular, reed-woven shield and try to block a barrage of thrown stones. Some are dull, some are sharp, some are just actual fruit, hurled by the instructor's toddler, for fun. You block them all. Mostly, then comes agility testing. You jump over obstacles made from logs, baskets, and occasionally other students. You crawl under ropes. You balance on poles. You fall off poles. You repeat, and then comes the worst part, the obstacle maze. It's filled with hanging nets, hot coals, mud pits, and a ceremonial jaguar skin filled with angry ants. Yes, it's intentional. Yes, the ants bite. Yes, you scream, quietly. When it's finally over, you collapse into a shady patch beneath a pepper tree. You're drenched in sweat, covered in bruises, and lightly dusted with paprika from falling into a spice cart. But you survived. That's what matters. The older students nod at you with something close to respect. One even offers you a dried cricket. You accept. It's disgusting, but it's an honor. As the sun sets, you gather for the final chant. Torches flicker around the courtyard. The priests lead the call. You answer, voice hoarse but steady. The chant is long, rhythmic. It lulls your senses. You think of your ancestors, of the gods, of blood, of battle, of the temple. You think of how short life is. You return home in silence, your body exhausted, your mind spinning with images of war and honor and obsidian. Your mother gives you a bowl of corn mush and a kiss on the forehead. You smile. Tomorrow, you train again. But let's talk about what you were, and perhaps more importantly, what you weren't wearing in medieval times. Because if you're imagining medieval folks getting into a bath with a rubber ducky and a bathrobe ready at the side, you may want to adjust your mental picture. In most medieval households, the average person owned 1 or 2 sets of clothes. That's it. Not one for winter, one for summer, one for parties, and one for church. Just 1 or 2 total. That means what? You wore often. You sweated in it. You worked in it. You maybe slept in it. And you definitely didn't toss it in the laundry at the end of the day. Because there was no such thing. Washing clothes was difficult, time-consuming, and in many cases, not done often at all. Most people beat their clothes on rocks by the river or soaked them in lye, a strong, often skin-burning substance made from ashes, before scrubbing them by hand. As you can imagine, clothing didn't last very long when treated this way, so people wore their garments for as long as they could, dirt, smells, and all. And when bath time came around, which, as we've covered, wasn't as often as you might hope, most people didn't even fully undress. Yes, that's right. You bathed in your shift, a kind of long linen undertunic, worn beneath your main clothing. Men and women both wore shifts, and they were usually the easiest thing to wash, so it made sense to keep them on while bathing. It also preserved a sense of modesty, especially in communal bathhouses, where you might be washing next to your neighbor, your priest, or your boss. For wealthier individuals, especially nobles and royalty, there was more flexibility. They might undress completely and bathe in private tubs with perfumes, oils, and linen towels. But even then, full nudity wasn't always expected. Some nobles, especially women, might bathe with attendants, helping them while they stayed partially clothed, covered by cloths, or simply hidden behind modesty screens. Now imagine this. You're in a wooden tub. Maybe the water is warm, maybe it's just lukewarm, or even cool, since heating water was a chore. You're wearing a linen shift that's slowly soaking through. It's heavy, sticking to your skin. The water is murky after the first few rinses. There's no soap like we have today, just something like lye-based ash soap, or herbal mixtures of rosemary and mint, maybe even old bacon fat mixed with lye. Not quite a spa day, is it? Underwear was another topic entirely. Many people didn't wear what we would consider underwear at all. Men might wear brais, a sort of linen shorts or loincloth, and women had no underpants in many cases. Just the shift. That's why when you got lice, and you probably did, you'd have nowhere to hide. And speaking of lice, it's one of the reasons people shaved their heads, or kept their hair covered with coifs or wimples. Wearing a linen coif helped protect the head from dust, sun, and insects, and it also made it easier to keep lice at bay. When you finally took your bath, you might wash your coif with you, right there in the tub. Shoes off, of course. But don't imagine flip-flops or sandals nearby. Medieval shoes were usually leather, hard-soled, and not exactly water-friendly. They were left well away from the tub to keep them dry, and to avoid them becoming homes for frogs or rats in a public bathhouse. Speaking of bathhouses, clothing played a big role in signaling your status in these spaces. In some places, nudity was more acceptable, especially in parts of Europe, like southern Germany and Italy. Men and women bathed together in some towns, though often with clothing on. In others, full nudity was frowned upon, or even forbidden. Your clothes might signal whether you were there for actual washing, or something a bit more scandalous. Bathhouses often doubled as places of entertainment, and sometimes of prostitution. That meant that what you wore, or didn't wear, could give others clues about your purpose for being there. A woman entering in fine clothes and leaving with her shift wet might be assumed to be noble. Another woman wearing flashy colors and no wimple might be assumed to be a bathhouse worker, or worse, a courtesan. The shift wasn't just about modesty. It also served as a sponge. As you sat in the water, the fabric absorbed dirt, sweat, and oils from your skin. When you stood up, your shift was often heavier than when you entered, and this made laundry all the more urgent, but also more of a burden. Linen shifts weren't white for long. They yellowed with use, darkened with sweat, and often took on a life of their own. If you were poor, you probably didn't even own a fresh one to change into after the bath. You dried yourself off as best you could, maybe sat in the sun, and put your outer clothes back on, right over the wet shift. Let's pause here and think about that. Putting back on your only tunic, scratchy wool hose, and maybe a leather belt over a still wet layer of fabric. No towel warmers, no soft bathrobes, no dry socks, just damp linen, scratchy wool, and the smell of wet wood. This was normal, and for women, things were even trickier. Under their dresses, women wore kirtles, which were like fitted gowns, often with lacing at the sides. Getting those wet was a hassle, so the shift acted as a barrier, a washable, sacrificial layer that bore the brunt of grime and sweat. Washing the kirtle was rare, washing the shift, as often as you could afford to. Colors mattered too. Brightly dyed clothes were expensive, often associated with status. After a bath, someone putting on deep reds or blues might draw attention, not always the good kind. Some bathhouses even had rules about what you could wear, to avoid confusion between customers and workers, and in winter, you probably didn't bathe at all. Taking your clothes off in cold weather, even partially, could be risky. You might catch a chill, or worse. That meant many people just waited out the season, adding layers of grime on top of last month's layers. When the thaw came, bathhouses filled up again, and people scrubbed off what they could, hoping their shifts would survive another round of boiling water and scrubbing. Children, too, bathed in shifts. Babies were sometimes dunked in barrels, or small wooden tubs. Mothers might bathe with infants clutched to their chest, trying not to let the baby slip into the murky water. The baby wore a tiny shift, or nothing at all, but the mother still wore hers. In some parts of Europe, monks and nuns had communal bath arrangements as well. Modesty rules meant they often bathed in tunics or underrobes. Entire orders sometimes had schedules to prevent mixed bathing or inappropriate exposure. Over time, as hygiene ideas evolved, so did attitudes toward clothing in the bath. By the late medieval period, especially in wealthier towns, people might bathe more often, and with slightly better tools. Wooden tubs gave way to tin or copper for the rich. Some bathhouses offered changing rooms with pegs to hang your garments. Still, most of the time, you just bathed in what you could afford to wash, and if you couldn't afford soap, you might use a bundle of herbs, like a medieval loofah, brushing your skin with rosemary, thyme, or chamomile. But the shift stayed on, so next time you peel off your shirt before hopping in a hot shower, consider your medieval ancestors, dunked in lukewarm water, fully clothed, scrubbing themselves with old lard and ash, and drying off with the same shift they wore in. Their idea of clean wasn't quite like ours, but to them, it was enough to feel cleansed, at least for a little while, enough to put the lice at bay, enough to face another week of toil, in the same clothes, under the same sun, because in medieval life, what you wore defined you, even, especially, when you were bathing. Let's move on to what you would have had to eat in a typical medieval day. Spoiler alert, it wasn't pizza. In medieval Europe, especially during the early Middle Ages, food was simple, repetitive, and based almost entirely on what could be grown locally or stored through harsh winters. There were no grocery stores, no refrigerators, no microwaves. If you were poor, and most people were, your diet was painfully repetitive. Day after day, you'd eat what was called pottage. Pottage was a kind of stew made from boiling whatever grains, vegetables, or roots were available. It could be thick or watery, depending on the season and your luck. On good days, there might be some peas, leeks, or cabbage thrown in. On bad days, it was just boiled weeds and maybe some barley. Bread was another staple. But again, this wasn't fluffy white bread. This was coarse, dark, heavy bread made from rye or barley, often mixed with chaff, or even ground up bark, if harvests were poor. And the bread wasn't fresh. It was often hard as a rock. You would soak it in broth or ale, just to be able to chew it. Meat was a rare luxury. If you were a peasant, you probably wouldn't taste meat more than a few times a year, usually on special church feast days or weddings. Chickens were more valuable alive than dead because they laid eggs. Pigs were useful, but costly. So, your main source of protein, probably beans or lentils. And sometimes, the occasional salted herring. If it could be afforded now, let's talk about preservation. Since there was no refrigeration, people had to get creative. Food was salted, smoked, pickled, or dried. This gave it a strange flavor and very little nutritional value. Salted meats were so tough they often needed hours of boiling to become chewable again. Let's also talk about table manners. You didn't get a plate of your own. Everyone ate from a shared dish, using their fingers or wooden spoons. There were no forks yet in most of Europe, and cleanliness was optional. People might wipe their hands on their clothing, the tablecloth, or their neighbor's back. Yes, really. And what about drinks? Water was not clean. Rivers and wells were easily contaminated, often with human or animal waste. That's why people, even children, drank weak ale or small beer, which had a low alcohol content but was safer than untreated water. The boiling process during brewing killed bacteria. It didn't taste great, but it wouldn't give you dysentery. Wine existed, but only for the rich, and milk, only in the countryside, and only in the spring, when animals gave birth. It was rarely drunk, or mostly turned into butter or cheese. Breakfast was usually just cold, leftovers, maybe some bread, maybe some cheese, if you were lucky. Lunch was eaten around noon, and was the biggest meal of the day. Dinner was lighter, eaten before sundown, because there was no lighting except for candles, and candles were expensive. Let's go back to the bread for a moment. If you lived in a manor, or served a lord, your bread might have been slightly better wheat, mixed with rye. But if you were a peasant, you might have eaten bread baked with something called maslin, a mix of grains that included whatever was cheapest or most available. Sometimes that included ergot-contaminated rye, which could cause hallucinations, convulsions, or even death. Entire villages were once struck by what they thought were demons, but it was just poisoned bread. Vegetables weren't what we eat today. Tomatoes, potatoes, corn, none of these existed in medieval Europe. They came from the Americas centuries later. Instead, people ate turnips, onions, cabbages, and leeks. No spices except salt, maybe mustard seeds, or garlic if you were lucky. Sugar, that was a luxury, reserved for the nobility. Most people had never tasted it. And sweets, the closest thing you'd get to a dessert would be some dried fruit, or maybe honey if a beekeeper lived nearby. Even that was rare. If you were rich, things were only slightly better. You'd have a cook, a full kitchen staff, and imported ingredients, like cinnamon or nutmeg. But even then, food storage was a problem. Food would go off quickly. So spices were often used to cover up the taste of rot. Feasting for the upper class was a display of wealth. Roasted boars, pies filled with live birds, yes, really, sugar sculptures, and jellied fish were all part of noble banquets. But these weren't daily meals. These were rare occasions. For 90% of people, though, dinner was plain, tasteless, heavy, and always too little. Now, imagine you've been out working the fields since sunrise. You've had nothing but a chunk of stale bread and a cup of ale all day. You return home, exhausted, to find the same barley pottage you had yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. You eat it in silence, by dim firelight, and then fall asleep on a straw mattress, stomach half full, before doing it all again tomorrow. Eating wasn't enjoyable in the medieval world. It was about survival, not pleasure. And if famine hit, as it often did, things got even worse. There are recorded famines in the 14th century where people boiled grass, tree bark, or even dug up animal bones to gnaw on starvation was always just one bad harvest away. In monasteries, monks ate simply two. Their diet was vegetarian most days. Meat was forbidden except on certain holidays. Fish was allowed, but only if it was fresh or preserved. They lived by routine: bread, broth, vegetables, and ale day in, day out, for life. Meanwhile, if you were a knight or part of the gentry, your meals were grander, but still hard on the stomach. No understanding of nutrition, no balanced meals. People believed in the four humors, and certain foods were hot, cold, moist, or dry. You might be prescribed chicken broth to calm a fever or cold porridge to settle your melancholy. It wasn't science, but it was all they had. The medieval diet was shaped by season, class, religion, and superstition. But in all cases, it was difficult, repetitive, limited, and often unhealthy. Today, we complain when the Wi-Fi is slow. Back then, a spoiled loaf of bread could mean starvation next time you sip clean water or bite into a fresh apple. Remember, those were unthinkable luxuries for most people just a few hundred years ago. Imagine waking up one morning not in your little wooden hut but standing before a massive stone bathhouse, steam rising all around you. This isn't your average medieval bath. No, this is something else. This is a public shower with a volcanic twist. Public baths in medieval Europe were common enough in towns and cities, but few had the luxury of heated water, let alone ones warmed naturally by volcanic heat. In places like Italy and parts of France, natural hot springs fed bathhouses, creating a kind of spa experience. People came not only to clean themselves, but also to socialize, gossip, and sometimes to conduct business deals. These bathhouses were usually large stone buildings with multiple rooms, changing areas, pools of different temperatures, steam rooms, and cold plunge pools. Bathing was a communal affair. Privacy was limited. You could see and hear your neighbors scrubbing themselves or chatting with friends. It was noisy, steamy, and sometimes chaotic. Now, add a volcanic twist. Some bathhouses were built right over geothermal vents. Imagine walking into a room where the floor is warm beneath your feet and jets of steaming hot water burst from the walls or the ground. The water smelled faintly of sulfur, that unmistakable smell of rotten eggs, but it was warm and inviting. The heat helped cleanse your skin and relax your muscles, making the bathhouse a place for healing as much as hygiene. Medieval doctors believed that bathing in these hot waters could cure ailments ranging from arthritis to skin diseases. But it wasn't all luxury and healing. The volcanic baths were also dangerous. The water temperature was hard to control. Some pools were scalding hot, causing burns. Others were lukewarm, breeding grounds for bacteria. People had to be careful where they stepped and how long they stayed. Most bathhouses were segregated by gender or had specific hours for men and women, but enforcement was lax. Stories abound of nobles sneaking into women's hours or peasants mixing freely, creating scandals. The smell of the volcanic springs, mixed with the sweat and grime of bathers, created a pungent aroma that was both familiar and overwhelming. Despite this, bathhouses were popular places for relaxation and even entertainment. They often featured music, poetry readings, or even gambling. It was common for patrons to spend hours there, chatting, eating light snacks, and drinking watered-down wine or ale. But not everyone loved the bath. The church had a complicated relationship with them. While cleanliness was praised, excessive bathing or bathing with strangers was sometimes condemned as sinful or immoral. Bathhouses were occasionally closed or restricted during certain periods. Also, bathhouses were hotspots for diseases, skin infections, lice, and even more serious illnesses spread easily in the warm, wet environment. Yet, for many people, the benefits of bathing outweighed the risks. If you lived in a town near a volcano, you might have experienced these baths. The volcanic heat made them unique, turning a basic hygiene practice into an extraordinary sensory experience. The feeling of warm steam against your cold skin, the bubbling water energized by the earth's heat. It was unlike any bath in the rest of medieval Europe. On the other hand, for the majority of people who didn't have access to such wonders, bathing was a simpler, less comfortable experience. Most bathed in cold water or warmed water heated over fires. They washed themselves with rough cloths or herbal brushes and dried off with scratchy linen shifts. Public bathhouses, with or without volcanic water, were more than just places to get clean. They were social hubs, places to meet, exchange news, and momentarily escape the hardships of daily life. They brought together peasants, merchants, nobles, and priests, all sharing the same steamy rooms, if only briefly. So next time you enjoy a hot shower or a spa day, remember the medieval bathers who sought warmth from volcanic springs or the cold splash of a public bath. They endured discomfort, risk, and social scrutiny just for the chance to feel clean, even if only for a little while. Imagine stepping into the world of the Aztec Empire, an empire ruled by warriors, priests, and rulers who believed the gods were constantly watching. In this world, your every move was not just noticed by your neighbors or your enemies, but by unseen forces, by the eyes of the gods, and by the very society that governed your life. You, an Aztec warrior, lived knowing that surveillance was part of your reality always. There was no privacy, as we understand it today. From the moment you woke up to the moment you slept, you were being watched. But who was watching, and why? Let's start with the obvious: the Aztec rulers. The emperor, his officials, and priests controlled every aspect of Aztec life. They used networks of informants and spies to keep an eye on both citizens and enemies. These watchers were everywhere, in marketplaces, in homes, even during ceremonies. The emperor needed to know who was loyal, who was plotting rebellion, and who was breaking the rules. The punishment for disloyalty or failure was severe public humiliation, enslavement, or worse. So keeping an eye on the population was essential. Now, imagine living under this constant gaze. You could not afford to make mistakes or show weakness. Every word you spoke, every action you took, might be reported to higher authorities. You might even be watched by neighbors or relatives who wanted to gain favor by informing on you. The Aztecs believed their gods were watching too. Their religious worldview was intertwined with surveillance. The gods demanded obedience and sacrifice. Temples and rituals were reminders that the gods saw all. The priests were the intermediaries between gods and humans. They observed the people, conducted ceremonies, and ensured everyone followed the religious laws. Failure to do so invited divine wrath. Imagine standing in a crowded market. You're buying maize or cacao. Around you, merchants, commoners, and nobles move, but hidden among them are officials watching for disorder, crime, or disrespect. You smile, but inside, you wonder if your behavior will please the gods and the rulers alike. Even warriors, the backbone of Aztec society, were watched closely. Your success in battle determined your rank and privileges, but failure or cowardice could mean punishment. Your progress was recorded symbolically, in codiciso, that the emperor and generals could assess your worth. Moreover, Aztec society was heavily ritualized. Public ceremonies, festivals, and military parades were opportunities to display loyalty and strength, but also to be observed and judged. Privacy was nearly non-existent. Homes were open and communal, often built around courtyards visible to neighbors. Walls were low. Conversations could be overheard. Gossip spread quickly. The psychological effect: constant pressure. You learned to censor yourself, to be careful with your words and deeds. Social order depended on this. But who enforced this surveillance? Aztec judges and officials, often dressed in distinctive clothing, patrolled the streets. They could arrest or punish on the spot. Laws were strict. Theft, adultery, drunkenness, and disobedience had harsh penalties. For warriors, failure in duty could mean loss of status or even death. The fear of being watched was both a social control and a survival mechanism. Now, let's consider one of the most fascinating forms of Aztec surveillance, the use of symbolic observation. The Aztecs used calendars, omens, and divination to predict behavior and maintain order. Priests studied the stars and interpreted signs. These were warnings to the people. The gods were watching, judging, and ready to punish. This spiritual surveillance was as real and terrifying as any human observer. For an Aztec warrior, the pressure was doubled. Not only did your human superiors watch your courage and discipline, but the gods watched your heart and your soul. Failing to meet expectations could mean not just social disgrace, but spiritual doom. This awareness shaped how you lived, fought, and died. Your daily routine involved prayer, ritual purification, and reflection to stay in favor with the divine watchers. In battle, you were expected to capture enemies for sacrifice, honoring the gods and proving your worth. Returning empty-handed was shameful. Your success elevated you in society and brought blessings. Your failure brought suspicion and danger. Even your death was public. Warriors who died heroically were honored in ceremonies watched by the entire community. In contrast, those who died cowardly or by disgrace were forgotten. So being watched was both a curse and a privilege. It maintained order and reinforced values. It shaped your identity as an Aztec warrior, and it reminded you every day that you were part of something bigger, a society where eyes were everywhere, visible and invisible. This was your life, always being watched. You're 14 and headed to war because capturing prisoners is better than killing them. Sort of. Imagine being just 14 years old. You've grown up in the heart of the Aztec Empire, hearing stories of brave warriors and glorious battles. Now, it's your turn. Today, you leave your home to march into the dense, humid jungle, not to kill, but to capture enemies alive. Yes, you heard that right. For the Aztecs, capturing prisoners was often more important than outright killing foes. But why? And what did this mean for a young warrior like you? The rite of passage, from boy to warrior at 14, you are no longer a child. The Aztec society expects you to prove yourself on the battlefield. Your family, your city, your gods, all watch your progress. The military schools, called Telpochkali, have trained you in weapons and tactics. You know how to use the Makuawitla wooden sword, edged with obsidian blades that can slice flesh like glass. You've practiced with the Otlot, a spear thrower that gives deadly speed to your darts. Your clothing and armor are simple, but symbolic. A cotton maxlatel loincloth, a feathered headdress, if you are lucky, and a shield made from wood and decorated with vibrant colors as you march out with other young warriors. The air is thick with anticipation and fear. The jungle awaits. The jungle, a deadly battlefield. The Aztec war was not just about brute force. It was a game of strategy, patience, and endurance. The jungle is dense and humid, filled with towering trees, tangled vines, and hidden dangers. You have to move quietly to avoid alerting enemy scouts. The sounds of exotic birds and insects fill the air, but so do the distant shouts of enemy warriors. Your heart pounds. You clutch your weapons tightly. Why capture, not kill? Unlike many other armies, the Aztecs fought with a unique goal: to take prisoners alive for ritual sacrifice. Killing enemies outright on the battlefield was less valued. A captured enemy was a trophy, a gift to the gods, and a sign of your bravery and skill. Capturing prisoners required close combat, skillful, disarming, and sometimes trickery. You might have to wrestle an enemy to the ground, avoid their deadly obsidian blades, and protect yourself from arrows. It was dangerous, exhausting, and brutal. The role of the young warrior at 14. You are usually assigned to smaller skirmishes or support roles. Your job may include scouting, flanking, or helping more experienced warriors. But the pressure to capture prisoners is high. If you manage to bring back a prisoner, your status skyrockets. You'll earn feathers, titles, and respect. If you fail, you risk shame, or worse. The brutality of combat jungle warfare is harsh. You face not only enemy warriors, but also insects, snakes, and treacherous terrain. Wounds can get infected quickly in the humid climate. You might go days without proper food or rest. Despite the danger, Aztec warriors rarely carried heavy armor, relying instead on agility and skill. Death was a constant companion, but survival meant glory. Rituals. Before and after battle. Before battle, priests perform ceremonies to bless you and the weapons. You wear war paint, symbols to intimidate enemies and honor the gods. After battle, successful warriors participate in rituals. Captured prisoners are handed over to priests for sacrifice. You might be involved in preparing the prisoners or watching the sacrifices. It's a grim reminder of the stakes, the psychological toll. Imagine being so young and witnessing death and bloodshed. The jungle's oppressive silence breaks only by screams and war cries. You are always alert, always tense. Yet, the culture demands courage and control. Fear is a luxury you cannot afford. Training for life. This brutal life prepares you for more battles. Each victory brings new opportunities. Some warriors become elite, eagle or jaguar warriors. These ranks come with privileges but also heavier burdens. Your youth, skill, and captured prisoners pave your path. Final thoughts for a 14-year-old Aztec warrior. Marching into jungle combat was terrifying and grueling. Capturing prisoners alive was both a sacred duty and a deadly challenge. The jungle was not just a battlefield, but a test of your spirit. Your success or failure shaped your future and your place in the empire, and every step you took was watched by gods, rulers, and peers. This was war, Aztec style. You get captured. Congratulations. Now you might get sacrificed. Glory. Imagine you're out there in the dense jungle, heart pounding, sweat mixing with dirt and blood. You fought bravely. You fought hard. But the enemy outmaneuvered you. You're captured, bound and dragged away from the battlefield. What happens now? Surprisingly, in the Aztec world, being captured was sometimes seen as an honor. Yes, you heard that right. Getting captured could lead to glory, but not in the way you might expect. The Aztec view on captured warriors like many other cultures that considered being captured a shame. The Aztecs viewed their prisoners differently. Prisoners were precious. They were the key to pleasing the gods. Warriors who were taken alive were not necessarily considered failures. Instead, their capture served a higher spiritual purpose. You see, the Aztecs believed that human sacrifice was essential to keep the universe in balance. The sun god, Huitzilopochtli, needed nourishment in the form of human hearts and blood to rise every day. Without these offerings, disaster would strike. So if you became a prisoner, you were destined to become part of a sacred ritual. Your life was about to end, but your death would serve the gods and the empire. The journey from prisoner to sacrifice. After capture, you'd be taken to the Kalpulitha, local community, or military barracks where priests prepared for the rituals. You might be held in captivity for weeks or months. During this time, you could be treated with a mix of respect and harshness. Some prisoners were trained in Aztec culture, learning songs and dances to perform during ceremonies. You were often fed well, ironically, since a strong, healthy prisoner made a better offering. The sacrificial ceremony, the day of sacrifice, was a solemn and terrifying occasion. You'd be led to the Templo Mayor, the great temple in Tenochtitlan. Surrounded by priests, warriors, and crowds, you descend the temple steps, your heart pounding louder than the drums. The priests wore elaborate feathered costumes and carried obsidian knives, sharp as razors. The ritual began with prayers and chants, invoking the gods. Then, in a final act of devotion, your heart would be cut out, still beating, offered to the sun god. Your body would then be thrown down the temple stairs, sometimes used in other ceremonies, or left as a symbol of sacrifice. The glory in death, though the act was brutal, it carried immense honor. You became a sacred offering, a vital part of the cosmic order. Your death was a gift that sustained the sun, the seasons, and the fertility of the land, for your family and your people. This was the highest form of glory. They would remember your name, celebrate your courage, and tell your story. You achieved something ordinary warriors never did, becoming an eternal servant to the gods. The psychological paradox: it's hard to imagine the courage it took to face such a fate. Prisoners were expected to accept their role with dignity and bravery. The Aztecs saw sacrifice as not just an end, but a transformation. Your spirit would live on, helping keep the world alive. This belief made the sacrifice both terrifying and meaningful. Alternatives to sacrifice: not every captured warrior was immediately sacrificed. Some were adopted into Aztec society. Others were ransomed back to their people. But these were exceptions, depending on politics and the emperor's decisions. The price of glory: if you failed to capture prisoners in battle, or showed cowardice, you risked harsh punishment. But if you were captured, you gained a different form of immortality. Sacrifice was the ultimate honor, a brutal price paid for cosmic balance. Remembering the captured in codices and carvings, scenes of sacrifice are common. They serve as reminders of the power of the gods and the importance of warriors. Your capture and sacrifice were not the end, but the beginning of a new role. Final reflection: so, if you were a young Aztec warrior marching into battle, the fear of death was constant. But the fear of capture might have been mingled with a strange pride, because in losing, you could become part of something greater, a ritual, a story, and a legacy that outlasted life itself. You were always being watched by gods, rulers, and your ancestors. And in your final moment, you would shine brightest of all. You're 14 and headed to war because capturing prisoners is better than killing them. Sort of. Imagine being just 14 years old. You've grown up in the heart of the Aztec Empire, hearing stories of brave warriors and glorious battles. Now, it's your turn. Today, you leave your home to march into the dense, humid jungle, not to kill, but to capture enemies alive. Yes, you heard that right. For the Aztecs, capturing prisoners was often more important than outright killing foes. But why? And what did this mean for a young warrior like you? The rite of passage, from boy to warrior at 14, you are no longer a child. The Aztec society expects you to prove yourself on the battlefield. Your family, your city, your gods, all watch your progress. The military schools, called Telpochkali, have trained you in weapons and tactics. You know how to use the Makuawitla wooden sword, edged with obsidian blades that can slice flesh like glass. You've practiced with the Otlot, a spear thrower that gives deadly speed to your darts. Your clothing and armor are simple, but symbolic. A cotton maxillotel loincloth, a feathered headdress, if you are lucky, and a shield made from wood and decorated with vibrant colors, as you march out with other young warriors. The air is thick with anticipation and fear. The jungle awaits. The jungle, a deadly battlefield. The Aztec war was not just about brute force. It was a game of strategy, patience, and endurance. The jungle is dense and humid, filled with towering trees, tangled vines, and hidden dangers. You have to move quietly to avoid alerting enemy scouts. The sounds of exotic birds and insects fill the air, but so do the distant shouts of enemy warriors. Your heart pounds. You clutch your weapons tightly. Why capture, not kill? Unlike many other armies, the Aztecs fought with a unique goal: to take prisoners alive for ritual sacrifice. Killing enemies outright on the battlefield was less valued. A captured enemy was a trophy, a gift to the gods, and a sign of your bravery and skill. Capturing prisoners required close combat, skillful, disarming, and sometimes trickery. You might have to wrestle an enemy to the ground, avoid their deadly obsidian blades, and protect yourself from arrows. It was dangerous, exhausting, and brutal. The role of the young warrior at 14. You are usually assigned to smaller skirmishes or support roles. Your job may include scouting, flanking, or helping more experienced warriors. But the pressure to capture prisoners is high. If you manage to bring back a prisoner, your status skyrockets. You'll earn feathers, titles, and respect. If you fail, you risk shame, or worse. The brutality of combat jungle warfare is harsh. You face not only enemy warriors, but also insects, snakes, and treacherous terrain. Wounds can get infected quickly in the humid climate. You might go days without proper food or rest. Despite the danger, Aztec warriors rarely carried heavy armor, relying instead on agility and skill. Death was a constant companion, but survival meant glory. Rituals. Before and after battle. Before battle, priests perform ceremonies to bless you and the weapons. You wear war paint, symbols to intimidate enemies and honor the gods. After battle, successful warriors participate in rituals. Captured prisoners are handed over to priests for sacrifice. You might be involved in preparing the prisoners or watching the sacrifices. It's a grim reminder of the stakes, the psychological toll. Imagine being so young and witnessing death and bloodshed. The jungle's oppressive silence breaks only by screams and war cries. You are always alert, always tense. Yet, the culture demands courage and control. Fear is a luxury you cannot afford. Training for life. This brutal life prepares you for more battles. Each victory brings new opportunities. Some warriors become elite, eagle or jaguar warriors. These ranks come with privileges but also heavier burdens. Your youth, skill, and captured prisoners pave your path. Final thoughts for a 14-year-old Aztec warrior. Marching into jungle combat was terrifying and grueling. Capturing prisoners alive was both a sacred duty and a deadly challenge. The jungle was not just a battlefield, but a test of your spirit. Your success or failure shaped your future and your place in the empire, and every step you took was watched by gods, rulers, and peers. This was war, Aztec style. You thought you'd relax. Nope. Tonight is a bloodletting ceremony. You're expected to participate. With obsidian on your tongue. You've just come back from the battle, your body aching, your mind exhausted. You think, maybe tonight you can finally rest, close your eyes, and forget the horrors of war. But you're wrong. Not even close. Because in the Aztec world, the battles didn't end when you left the jungle or stepped away from the battlefield. No, for you, a young Aztec warrior, the night holds its own battles. Tonight, you're expected to participate in a bloodletting ceremony, and not just any ceremony. One that demands a sharp obsidian blade slicing your tongue. Why bloodletting? It might sound cruel, painful, even terrifying, and it is. But to the Aztecs, blood was not just blood. It was life's very essence, a sacred offering that kept the gods happy and the universe in balance. They believed that without this constant sacrifice of blood, both from prisoners and their own people, the sun would stop rising, the rains would cease, crops would fail, and disaster would fall upon the world. So, bloodletting was a way to give back to the gods, a symbol of loyalty and devotion. Everyone, from nobles to commoners, priests to warriors, took part in these rituals. The obsidian blade, a sacred tool tonight. The tool of sacrifice is obsidian, a volcanic glass so sharp it can cut flesh as cleanly as a scalpel. Obsidian is more than a weapon or tool. It's a spiritual symbol. The black, glassy surface reflects both the darkness of the earth and the fiery forces within. Handling obsidian requires care and respect. It is both a bridge to the divine and a tool for pain. You feel the weight of the blade in your hand, its cold sharpness, almost mocking your fear. The tongue, organ of truth and power, bloodletting on the tongue, is particularly dreaded. Your tongue is vital. It lets you speak, sing, and communicate. Piercing or slicing it causes sharp pain, and the bleeding makes talking afterward difficult. But for the Aztecs, the tongue was sacred. It was the organ of speech, the bearer of truth, and a conduit between humans and gods. Offering blood from your tongue was a powerful statement. You give not only your life force, but also your voice and loyalty to the gods. This act showed humility and courage, and it was expected from warriors like you. Preparing for the ceremony before the ritual, you must prepare your body and mind. You may fast, cleansing yourself from earthly distractions. You bathe in water infused with herbs, washing away sweat, grime, and doubt. Your clothes are simple, sometimes ornate, depending on your status, but always clean and sacred. Incense fills the air with smoky fragrance, mixing with the scent of burning copal resin. You enter the temple, the flickering torchlight, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. The chants of priests surround you, their voices rising and falling in ancient melodies. Your heart pounds as you kneel before the altar. The ceremony unfolds. The high priest stands before you, dressed in bright feathers and carrying ritual implements. He chants prayers calling the gods Huitzilopochtli, the sun god, Tlaloc, the rain god, and others. The crowd around you is silent, expectant. You close your eyes, steady your breathing, and grasp the obsidian blade. With deliberate care, you slice or pierce your tongue. The sharp sting is immediate. Blood wells up, hot and metallic. You drip it onto the altar, the crimson drops soaking into sacred cloths or pools. The meaning behind the pain is real, sharp, but it's not just punishment or torture. It is connection, a link between mortal and divine. By shedding your blood, you show your devotion. You remind the gods that you are part of their cosmic plan. The ritual reinforces social bonds, religious faith, and the order of society. Those who refuse or fail this ceremony risk scorn, or worse, bloodletting and status. Not everyone's bloodletting is equal. Nobles may use elaborate tools, cactus spines, cords weighted with stones pulled through the skin, drawing more blood and showing greater sacrifice. Warriors like you participate in rites marking your progress and loyalty. The amount of blood offered can determine your honor and standing. It is a test of endurance, faith, and courage. After the ritual, healing and reflection, the wounds from the ceremony bleed and ache for days. You feel weakness, dizziness, and fatigue. Your mouth is sore, your tongue swollen. But you also feel pride you have given to the gods. You meditate on your role in keeping the world alive. Pain becomes part of your identity, a badge of honor. The cycle of endless rituals. Bloodletting is not a one-time event. The Aztec calendar is full of ceremonies demanding offerings. You live in a world where sacrifice never ends. It only pauses between battles and festivals. Your life as a warrior is tied to this cycle, each ritual reinforcing the last final thought. So when you think the day's battles are over, remember this: your body is still a battlefield. The obsidian blade waits. Your blood, your pain, and your sacrifice keep the sun rising and the empire thriving. This ritual, painful and relentless, is your duty, your honor, and it never ends. You're 19 years old now. That's a big deal. Not because there's cake or a party, not because there are presents, and definitely not because you're now allowed to drive a chariot or get married in some formal legal sense. No, you're 19, and in the Aztec Empire, that means you're halfway through your life. If you're lucky. Let's be clear. In the modern world, people complain about turning 30. They talk about feeling old at 40. In some places, 60 is considered the new 50, but in Tenno, the height of Aztec civilization, reaching 30 was like spotting a rainbow made of gold feathers, extremely rare, possibly a divine sign, and usually followed by something horrible. Because here's the truth. Most Aztec warriors didn't get old. They didn't grow gray beards. They didn't tell stories to their grandchildren about the old days. They didn't even get grandchildren, and not because they were weak, not because they lacked courage. No, it was because every part of Aztec life, every single step was touched by death. From the day you were born, death wasn't just a possibility. It was part of your daily schedule. There were no safe years. Let's walk through it. As a baby, you could die from disease, or hunger, or exposure. Your parents were doing their best heating your swaddle over coals, praying to Tlaloc for rain, feeding you maize mush. But life was fragile. If you survived childhood, congratulations. Now you'd help grind corn for hours a day. Sometimes your fingers would blister and swell from the metate stone. No one cared. You were strong now. By the time you were 12, you had calluses on your hands, and dreams of becoming an eagle warrior. By 15, you were sent out with obsidian clubs and told to capture an enemy. By 18, you were expected to have taken at least 2 prisoners or risk being called a coward. So by the time you were 19, well, you were already pretty tired. Your joints ached. You had deep scars from battle. You had fasted for days during ceremonies. You had cut your own tongue more than once, dripping blood on paper as an offering to Huitzilopochtli, and still, you weren't guaranteed anything. Not survival, not peace, not even honor. Because in the Aztec world, life didn't work like that. There were rules, of course dozens of them, but they didn't protect you. They reminded you that you were always, always, in the hands of the gods. Every day was a gamble. Now, here's something strange. You could be a good warrior. You could follow every ritual. You could carry out every order. And still, you could be chosen for ritual sacrifice, not because you did something wrong, but because the priest thought you had good muscles, because the city needed a good rain, because the calendar wheel had turned a certain way, because your name matched a prophecy, or simply because the crowd liked you. Yes, sometimes, popularity got you killed. In the Aztec Empire, to be admired too much could mean being picked as a Tlaxotecatla, festival sacrifice. You'd be treated well, bathed, fed, adorned in flowers and feathers, and then marched up the pyramid steps, where a knife of volcanic glass would open your chest. Your still beating heart would be offered to the sun god. It sounds brutal, because it is. But also, to the Aztecs, this was noble. This was spiritual. This was fuel for the universe. They believed that if the gods didn't receive blood, the sun might not rise. And without the sun, what was the point of life? So yes, even the healthiest 19-year-old in the world, muscular, fast, brave, could still be sacrificed for rain, or sun, or war, or corn. Life wasn't about making it to retirement. It was about being useful to the gods, in whatever form that took. There were no pensions, only offerings. If you didn't die in battle, or from disease, or as a sacrifice, then what? Then maybe you made it 2 to 5. By now, your knees cracked when you stood. Your eyes blurred in the morning. You had seen friends taken, brothers gone, wives lost in childbirth. You had learned how to dance the serpent step during fire ceremonies. You had burned incense until your lungs ached. You had stayed awake under full moons to chant prayers to invisible stars, and still there were no guarantees. At any moment, someone might knock on your reed door and say, "The priests require volunteers," which wasn't a question. If you were lucky, you might end up giving blood instead of your life, but even that wasn't easy. Bloodletting meant cutting your tongue, or your ears, or even your genitals. In some ceremonies, yes, you'd take a long strip of thorny maguey spine and press it against your skin and pull, not because you were crazy, but because pain was prayer. Pain was the only currency the gods respected. Your pain was the price of balance, and if you refused, then maybe a neighbor would report you, or a priest would dream your name. And then, back to the pyramid steps. The body was a temporary gift in Aztec belief. Your body didn't belong to you. It was a loan, a temporary structure, a house for your soul, which needed to earn its place in the afterlife. But here's the kicker: even in the afterlife, it was complicated. If you died by drowning, you went to Tlalocan, the watery paradise. If you died in battle, you could rise with the sun. If you died in childbirth, you could become a spirit cloud. But if you died of old age, if you quietly faded into a wrinkled figure, coughing in a hammock, you weren't special. You were just recycled. So in a strange way, dying violently was better. It gave you meaning. It gave your soul purpose. It gave your family honor. But still, let's not forget something important. You didn't choose most of this. You were born into it. Born into a world where gods needed blood, where war was currency, where honor was wrapped in pain. You were 19, and already halfway to gone. A world where time was a circle in modern calendars. Time is a straight line. You're born, you grow, you work, you rest, you die. But to the Aztecs, time was circular. Every 52 years, the calendar reset. The new fire ceremony took place. People extinguished their fires and waited in darkness. If the stars aligned, a flame would be relit. If not, the world would end. This wasn't metaphor. This was literal. People were terrified every time the 52-year mark approached. So even if you did survive your teen years, even if you made it to 30 or 35, you lived knowing that any year, any moment, could be the last of the world. What a strange way to live, and yet to them, it was normal, expected, balanced, pain and joy, blood and rain, sacrifice and life, all connected in a circle of bone and fire. Final thoughts. You were never safe, so here you are, you're 19, your heart still beats. You've made it through battles, fasts, and blood rituals. Your bones haven't cracked completely yet. You'll still dream of becoming a jaguar knight, but in your quietest moments, as you lie awake in your straw hammock, listening to the distant beat of ceremonial drums, you wonder, will tomorrow be the day I'm chosen? Will my name echo across the temple? Will I climb those steps and never return? And strangely, you're okay with that, because that's what it meant to live as an Aztec warrior. Not for comfort, not for peace, not for growing old, but to burn bright, briefly, and become part of something cosmic. The Aztec Empire was many things advanced, spiritual, and terrifying, and nowhere was that more apparent than in their unique system of justice. The Aztecs believed that order came through fear, and fear came through pain. There were laws for nearly everything, and those laws were enforced swiftly, often with public spectacle, and always with consequences. Let's say you're back from battle. You're exhausted, wounded, and just trying to grab a roasted pepper from the local market stall. But you didn't pay. That pepper wasn't yours. You just committed theft. In today's world, maybe someone would shout at you. Maybe a security guard would chase you. Maybe you'd get a warning. But in Tenochtitlan, that simple act just cost you your hand. No lawyers, no trail, just consequences. The Aztecs believed in justice, but not in mercy. There were judges, but you didn't get to argue your case in front of a sympathetic jury. If a noble accused you of stealing, speaking disrespectfully, or disobeying, chances are the punishment was already being prepared. Court sessions took place in open-air plazas, and some decisions were made right on the spot, especially for commoners. The idea was simple: Punish quickly, punish publicly, and let everyone watching think twice before making the same mistake. It was a performance of pain designed to prevent future crime. The laws of Moctezuma, most famous and feared lawmaker of the Aztec world, was Emperor Moctezuma I, not to be confused with Moctezuma II, the one who met the Spanish I created a legal code that outlined specific punishments for specific crimes. The punishments were harsh and sometimes bizarre, but they were consistent. Some highlights from the Aztec legal code: stealing corn, death; drinking alcohol as a teenager, death; cutting down a tree from the king's forest, yep, death; cheating on your spouse, also death; using someone else's land without permission, eviction and public shaming. Repeat offenders weren't treated lightly. In fact, many crimes were only forgiven once repeat the act, and execution was considered merciful compared to the other available punishments. Child punishments, welcome to school, and torture. Aztec children were taught from a young age that pain equals discipline. If you were lazy, rude, or defiant, your parents could bring you to the school temple to be corrected. This wasn't detention. You'd be pinched with cactus thorns, made to inhale chilly smoke, or tied and left outside overnight. And if you think this was just a scare tactic, it wasn't. It was deeply believed that if a child wasn't punished young, they'd grow into a criminal, and criminals were society's poison. Pain was not just a consequence, it was a cure. Even upper-class children weren't spared. If anything, nobles were held to stricter rules, because they were seen as examples for the rest of the population. Talking back could end with tongue-piercing respected silence, especially from commoners. Speaking out of turn could be interpreted as disrespect to a noble, a priest, or even your own father. If you were caught gossiping, shouting in public, or criticizing someone above your station, it could end in mutilation. One common punishment: obsidian blade through the tongue, not symbolic, not metaphorical. They would slice your tongue or lips with razor-sharp volcanic glass. The scars would remind you and everyone else not to speak carelessly again. The marketplace, a place of commerce and surveillance. Every major Aztec city had a bustling market, but these weren't free-for-alls. They were tightly monitored spaces. Officials wandered the rows in plain sight, listening, watching, and ready to step in. Prices were regulated, weights were measured, and haggling was allowed, but cheating, never. Selling fake goods could lead to beatings or fines. Lying about weights could lead to amputation, and shouting or starting a fight would result in guards dragging you away by your hair. Buying and selling was sacred. It kept the empire functioning, and violating that trust, a personal insult to the gods of trade and justice. False accusations were just as dangerous. Let's say you don't like your neighbor. They're loud. They let their kids run wild. You decide to accuse them of stealing your maize. Be careful. If the court finds out you lied, you'll suffer the punishment meant for them. False accusations were considered acts of betrayal, not just to your victim, but to the gods. Truth was sacred. So if your accusation couldn't be backed by multiple witnesses or tangible evidence, it could turn against you. In some cases, accusers were whipped, and others exiled. And if the crime they falsely accused someone of was serious, like treason or sacrilege, death was possible. Nobles had it worse sometimes. Aztec society was very hierarchical. Commoners were expected to obey nobles, but nobles were expected to be perfect. If a commoner committed a crime, they might be fined or exiled. If a noble committed the same crime, they might be executed to set an example. Why? Because nobles had the privilege of education, resources, and divine favor. That meant they had no excuse for wrongdoing. And their punishment, in theory, cleansed the dishonor from their lineage. There were even laws that specifically stated a crime committed by a noble must be punished more harshly than if it had been done by a peasant. Capital punishment with spiritual style execution wasn't always just a practical punishment. It was often theatrical and spiritual. Some executions were public and meant to horrify. Others were ritualistic, meant to satisfy gods. One infamous method involved binding the offender, painting them, dressing them as a specific deity, and sacrificing them as if they were the god incarnate, turning punishment into sacred theater. A final chance to serve the empire in death, even if you had failed it in life. It blurred the line between crime and religion, between justice and sacrifice. Tattoos, branding, and shame as punishments. All punishments were fatal. Some were designed to leave marks. A thief might have his head shaved, his ears pierced with bone, or his face tattooed with a permanent symbol of his crime. These marks weren't just scars. They were warnings. They told the community, this man has failed us once. And in a world where reputation was everything, these marks often destroyed a person's future, leading to exile or lifelong poverty. Some people even fled the city just to escape the stares. No appeals, no second chances. In some rare cases, people could appeal to a higher court, but these were usually reserved for nobles or warriors. For the average citizen, the first sentence was the final word. Justice moved quickly. There were no lawyers, no delays, no long investigations. Sometimes a case would be decided within the hour, and the punishment carried out that same day. The idea was to keep order. Fear, not forgiveness, was the tool of the law. Why this mattered to you, as a warrior you may think, I'm a soldier, I fight for the empire. Surely I'm above this. Not quite. Aztec warriors were respected but also heavily scrutinized. The pressure to be brave, respectful, and honorable didn't stop when you left the battlefield. If you were caught drinking outside of sanctioned festivals, death. If you assaulted a noble in a drunken brawl, public execution, and worst of all, if you failed in war and survived, you risked being labeled a coward, a crime in itself. Cowards were sometimes forced into shame rituals or sacrificed to cleanse their dishonor, so you walked a fine line. Hero today, criminal tomorrow. Conclusion: the price of order was pain. Aztec justice wasn't about kindness, it was about stability, and fear was the foundation. It kept the cities quiet, the markets fair, and the temples clean. But for the average Aztecs, especially a warrior, it meant every word you said. Every step you took, every pepper you picked up, could be your last free moment. Because in the Aztec Empire, justice never slept. It watched, it listened, and it always, always hurt. Now rest, knowing that at least tonight, your fingers are still attached. No rain means no corn. No corn means citywide panic and human sacrifice marathons. You awaken to a quiet morning, too quiet. No birds, no dripping dew, and most importantly, no signs of last night's expected rainfall. This is bad. You live in a world that runs on maize, not metaphorically, literally. Corn is your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner. It's your tribute, your trade, and your temple offering. And now, the clouds have stopped cooperating. It's been 27 days since the last good rain. The soil is cracked, the leaves are brown. The Chinampazea, the floating gardens are looking less like gardens, and more like sun-scorched gnats of sadness. There's a problem in the capital, and it's not a small one. You see, the Aztec Empire, for all its military power and urban engineering, was astonishingly fragile when it came to agriculture. The balance was razor thin. Too much rain and the crops rot. Too little and the people riot. Right now, the balance has tipped, and you can feel it. You walk through the market, and everyone's quieter than usual. The tamale seller isn't shouting. The cacao traders are nervously glancing at the sky. There are rumors that the emperor himself is fasting, a sign of desperation. The gods must be angry. Tlaloc, god of rain, must be displeased. And when Tlaloc is displeased, things get dark. The corn crisis begins by the third week without rainfall. Panic sets in. The priests are consulted. Omens are read. Calendars are flipped and reflipped. Someone saw a two-headed lizard near the temple stairs. Someone else found a jaguar paw in their maize basket. This is enough evidence. The gods are demanding something, so naturally, the solution is sacrifice. But not just any sacrifice. Welcome to the festival of panic in times of drought. Aztec society didn't simply wait and hope. They acted, and that meant blood. Human blood. Lots of it. You're told that the priests have begun preparing for an emergency ritual. It will last several days. It may involve hundreds of hearts. Talak likes children, they whisper, because their tears are pure. Because their fear pleases the god of rain. You try not to think about it. You try not to look too young. You try not to cry, because crying draws attention, and attention is dangerous. Hungry gods, empty stomachs. The drought goes on. Maize is rationed. Prices soar. You're now chewing on squash stems and cactus pads. You haven't had a full stomach in 3 days. Your brother traded your family's last cacao beans for 2 shriveled avocados. But the priests have good news. The ceremonies have begun. On top of the great temple, drums are pounding. The scent of copal fills the air, and the streets are now too quiet again, because no one wants to be selected for the honor of being sacrificed to TLA. LOC. Children go missing at night. You hear the wails from the temple as dawn breaks. You feel the vibration of the obsidian, blades being sharpened, still no rain. Rituals of desperation, the festival reaches its peak. You witness something you wish you hadn't. A line of young captives being paraded up the temple steps. Some are dressed in blue, the color of Tlaloc. Their eyes are wide, unblinking. They've been told they are saving the city. But their fear is all too clear. The priests cut them open. The hearts are raised. Blood flows down the stone steps. You look up, half hoping the sky will crack and rain will pour in reply. But the clouds remain stubborn, dry, mocking corn, the crumbling foundation. It's important to remember that the Aztec economy wasn't industrial. It wasn't fueled by coin or metal. It was fueled by calories primarily from corn. When the corn fails, the economy fails. Trade halts. Military campaigns are postponed. The tribute system falters, and starvation creeps in like a fog. You've now seen families leaving the city, seeking better luck in the countryside. But there's no luck to be found. The rivers are low. The soil is like powder. Even the frogs have vanished. Your mother begins boiling leather sandals to make broth. You pretend it's tamale stew. State-sanctioned sadness. The emperor issues a decree, public fasting, mandatory participation in rituals, and daily offerings. You now spend hours each day walking barefoot over hot stones as penance. Your feet are blistered. But the priests say this pain is good. It shows Tlaloc your sincerity. They also say more blood is needed. Always more blood. This time, it's the warriors. Volunteers are. Those who can't pay their taxes are selected to join the rain dances. These dances are symbolic, but they end with sacrifice. A sort of spiritual plea that combines physical movement with mortal surrender. You watch a man you knew climb the steps in silence. You never see him come back down. The drumbeat of drought. By now, the temple drums have become part of your nightmares. They echo constantly, deep and slow, like a heartbeat in the bones of the city. The ceremonies never stop. Even at night, you can hear the chants. The priests no longer sleep. Neither do you. And then something strange happens. The sky changes. Color. Dark clouds roll in. The temperature drops. People gather in the square, staring upward, mouths open, eyes wide. A single raindrop falls onto your shoulder. You don't dare breathe. And then, it rains. Real rain. Heavy, unrelenting, loud, joyous. People scream, cry, collapse. Children run into the streets. Farmers dash to their fields. Mothers give thanks. Priests offer final prayers over the last of the sacrifice altars. And just like that, the drought ends, but not without Costa. Harvest is saved, but it will be smaller, leaner, scarred. The memory of those weeks will linger, the silence, the hunger, the fear, and the sacrifices. So many sacrifices. Your neighbor's son never returned. Count the days until the next rainy season and pray it's not like this one. Because when it doesn't rain, you don't just starve, you sacrifice, you tremble, you bleed, and Tualok watches it all with patient, stormy eyes. You've memorized 200 deity names, but forget one on the wrong day, and, well, good luck. Let us begin. You wake up. It is not your name, you whisper. It is not your mother's name. It is not even the name of your emperor. No, it is the name of a god. Perhaps Talok, god of rain. Perhaps Huitzilopochtli, god of sun and war. Or maybe Zip-Totec, the flayed god. The one whose priests wear human skin, because today is his day. And if you forget his name, you might be next Aztec. Religion was busy. Imagine trying to memorize your school's subjects. Now imagine each one has a face, and a shrine, and a punishment if you forget. There were gods for everything. Rain, fire, corn, flowers, salt, sex, war, frogs. Yes, frogs. Each god had a birthday, a ceremony, a sacrifice, and a set of sacred duties. If you got the duties wrong, oops, let's say today is a festival for Zilonin, the young maize goddess. If you offer her the wrong kind of corn, she won't bring rain. No rain means no food. No food means sacrifice. And who gets sacrificed? Not the priest, you did. The Aztecs didn't just believe in gods. They lived them. Every part of life was entangled with worship, from how you cooked your breakfast to how you sharpened your obsidian blade. Let's break it down. Morning routines. Step 1. Wake up before sunrise, because Toneshu, the sun god, demands it. He needs human blood to rise. Your first thought is a prayer. Your first action, cut your ear. Drip a little blood into a bowl. This is normal. This is daily. Don't complain. Breakfast. Sacred corn. You want tamales? Say thank you to Saniatal. He's the god of maize. You must burn a piece of your breakfast as an offering. If you eat before the gods eat, that's considered theft. And theft is punished by the god Tezcatlipoca. He watches you in every polished obsidian mirror. Yes, your mirror is watching. Back, midday tasks, going to the market. Say a prayer to Yacatekli, god of travelers, selling salt. Honor Huixtachuitl, goddess of salt, buying sandals. Don't forget Chicamcotl, goddess of sustenance. She might be judging your taste in footwear. Each interaction is a tiny ritual. Each moment is sacred. Each breath is borrowed. You see a butterfly. It reminds you of Itzpapaltl, the obsidian butterfly, a goddess of death. So you quietly mutter her name, just in case. Evening sacrifices, the sun sets, so does your freedom. Now comes the ceremony. Maybe it's a dance. Maybe it's a bloodletting. Maybe it's worse. Did you remember to bring copal incense? Did you memorize the chant for Koyulzokwi, the moon goddess? Because tonight is hers? And if you mispronounce her name during the ritual, you are not just embarrassed. You are dead. Dreams. Of gods even, your dreams are not safe. The god Tezcatlipoca may visit you in sleep. If he smiles at you, you're cursed. If he frowns at you, you're cursed. If he says nothing, you're still cursed. There is no winning, only surviving. The calendar of terror. There are 260 sacred days, and 365 solar days. That's 585 total ritual opportunities. You are expected to remember which day belongs to which god. You are expected to behave accordingly, every single day. You accidentally wear red on Tlaloc's day. That's an insult. Tlaloc prefers blue, your punishment. a lightning bolt, or food poisoning. Same thing, really? Social pressure your neighbor. He remembers every god. He sings every hymn. He sacrifices to doves before breakfast. You forgot Tlazolteotl, goddess of purification. And you just swore at your neighbor now. She thinks you're cursed. She reports you to the priests. They summon you. You are offered a choice, confess, or ... burn. You confess. They forgive you, but they still cut your tongue. Just a little dot to remind you to speak properly next time. Human avatars, here's the fun part. Sometimes, you are chosen to impersonate a god. They call you a tuxiptla. Sounds like an honor. It's not. You wear feathers. You dance. You sing. You're treated like royalty. For 1 year. Then, you are sacrificed. Your heart cut out. Your skull turned into a temple decoration. They call it glory. You call it terror. Confusing multiples. Let's not forget gods have multiple names. Quetzal, the feathered serpent, also goes by Ihaketl, C. Akatal, White, Tezcatlipocaso. You might think you're praying to the wind, but you're accidentally praying to death. This happens often. Did we mention duality? Most gods have a light side and a dark side. Pray for sunshine. The sun might burn your crops. Ask for rain. Floods. There is no such thing as a safe prayer, child. Sacrifice. Yup. TLALOC loves children. Too much. Especially their tears. So when the harvest fails, children are sacrificed. Priests make sure they cry beforehand, because crying pleases TLALOC. This is normal. This is sacred. This is your culture. Final thoughts. You are 19 years old. You have memorized 200 god names. You still wake up terrified you forgot one. You perform 10 rituals a day, and 2 ceremonies per week. You've burned offerings, spilled blood, danced, confessed, but it's never enough. You dream of silence, of forgetting, of a world without gods. But here, in the heart of Tenochtitlan, even silence belongs to someone. Even forgetting is punished. And so, you whisper your prayers. You light your incense. You bow to the sun. You try to remember the next name, because tomorrow is another God's day, and he is watching. Always. The air is thick with the scent of roasted cacao beans. The steam rises from a bowl of spiced turkey stew. On a woven mat under a shaded awning, a noble leans back, sipping a frothy chocolate drink sweetened with honey, served in an obsidian cup. There's music, there's laughter, and no one is bleeding. Now imagine where you are. You're sitting on a woven reed mat, too, but yours is fraying at the edges. Your hands are blistered from hauling stones, or chopping wood, or weaving coarse fabric. You're chewing on maize paste, dry, bland, barely enough to swallow. You hear laughter too, but it's coming from the upper courtyard, where you aren't allowed. This is life in the Aztec Empire, and this is the quiet, persistent divide between the nobility and everyone else. Nobles and the good life. Aztec society was a pyramid. At the top, the nobles called Pippleton. Below them, everyone else, known as the Welton. If you're watching this video, chances are, you're not nobility. So your experience is far more dirt and sweat than gold, and cacao. The Pippleton didn't just have wealth, they had power, prestige, and comfort. Many were priests, generals, judges, or administrators. Their homes were large, multi-roomed structures, with gardens and courtyards. They wore fine cotton garments, dyed in rare colors, and decorated with shells and feathers. And their food, their food. While you're munching on corn tortillas with a smear of beans, they're dining on rabbit, turkey, duck, and even freshwater fish. They enjoyed sauces made with chili, tomatoes, and pumpkin seeds, and chocolate. That was for nobles. For you, chocolate was more myth than memory. And what about drinks? Nobles could drink pulque, a mildly alcoholic drink made from the maguey plant. For commoners, drinking was regulated, lest you were old or sick. Alcohol could get you punished. Nobles, of course, drank freely during ceremonies and feasts. You're always working. They're always served. Your day begins at sunrise. If you're a farmer, you're heading into the milpa fields. If you're a craftsman, you're weaving or carving. If you're a warrior, you're training or marching. There's no real break. You work, you rest briefly, and you start again. The nobles, they have workers for that. Servants maintain their homes, prepare their meals, even carry their gear in battle. If you're lucky, you get to serve them. If you're unlucky, you anger one end, face punishment. Even your education is different. Aztec commoners were taught to be obedient, humble, and strong. Nobles, however, were trained in leadership, philosophy, religion, and history. They were raised to rule, and you were raised to serve. And it gets worse. When you bleed, you stay down. When they bleed, they're honored. Warfare was everywhere in Aztec society. You were expected to become a warrior. You bled in battles. If you died in one, great your spirit had a noble fate. If you didn't, you came home to wounds, broken bones, and no compensation. But for nobles, battle was theater. Their victories were recorded in codices, their names remembered, their portraits painted. When they captured enemies, it was a badge of honor. When you did, just another tally, maybe a slight raise in status, if you're lucky. If a noble died in battle, songs were sung, offerings were made, families were elevated. If you died, your family cried, then went back to farming. There was no monument, no story, no praise. The justice system was adjustable. Did a noble insult someone, maybe it's discussed at court, maybe nothing happens. But if you do the same, public beating, possibly death. Laws existed, sure, but how they were enforced depended on your status. A noble could afford bribes, influence judges, or just be let off because of their class. You couldn't even raise your voice in court. Even clothing laws existed. You couldn't wear cotton or certain colors unless you were elite. Doing so could get you punished. Nobles wore them daily, flaunting their position. And don't forget taxes. You pay them. Nobles don't. In fact, part of your taxes might go directly to a noble household. You might even owe labor. That's right, too, could be forced to help build their home, farm their land, or carry their things as part of your obligation. Ceremonies for them, chores for you. Feast days in Aztec society were extravagant. Music, dancing, processions, food, gifts for the gods. For nobles, these were times of joy and display. For you, these were days of work. Someone has to prepare the feast. Someone has to clean the temples, dress the statues, gather the flowers. Someone has to catch and cook the food. And usually, it's you. And when the feast ends, nobles rest. You clean. If you're lucky, you get a leftover tamale. But don't eat too fast. It might be the best meal you get all week. Marrying up. Not a chance. You can't marry a noble. Not unless you become a legendary warrior or priest. And even then, the family might refuse. Bloodlines mattered. Status mattered more than love. If you do happen to rise in battle, maybe you capture 4 prisoners, you get to wear a jaguar skin. That's something. Maybe now nobles greet you with a nod, but marry into their ranks. Not likely. Meanwhile, nobles married strategically. Daughters of priests married generals. Sons of governors married priestesses. Families were merging for power and influence. You married someone from your Kalpuli neighborhood group and hoped for a good harvest. Their deaths were spiritual. Yours were functional. Noble funerals involved offerings, ceremonies, incense, and songs. Commoners, simpler burials. If your family could afford it, maybe a small ceremony. But mostly, it was quick and practical. You might be cremated with minimal offerings. Your name wouldn't be recorded. Your life remembered only by your children, if you had any. Nobles, on the other hand, had their deeds written in codices, and their images painted in murals. Even in death, the gap remained. You dream, they decide. Let's say you're ambitious. You want more. Maybe you're clever, hardworking, and brave. But in Aztec society, the ladder is mostly nailed to the floor. Your birth determines your path. Sure, warriors could rise. Priests could earn influence. But the day-to-day decisions? They're made by councils of nobles, priesthoods, and emperors. You obey. You follow. You hope. Even your dreams, your quiet hopes of owning land or learning to read the sacred texts are restricted. Unless you're selected or recognized, those ambitions stay dreams. Meanwhile, nobles were encouraged to dream big. Their sons were told they would become judges, priests, generals. Their education supported that. Their connections guaranteed it. Final thought. You're necessary, but not important. Without you, the city doesn't run. You build the homes, grow the food, fight the wars. But you're invisible in stories. You're a number in taxes, a worker in temples, a body in battle. Nobles needed you, but they didn't need to know you. You are the quiet, tireless engine of the empire. You make it work, but you do so without thanks, without luxury, without recognition. And every evening, as the nobles recline with their chocolate and music, you fall asleep on your woven mat, body sore, belly half full, mind quiet, because that is what it meant to not be a noble in the Aztec Empire. At first glance, Tenochtitlan was a dazzling city, a place of wonder floating on water, with grand temples, sprawling markets, and shimmering canals that reflected the pink hues of sunset. But when the sun dipped below the horizon, the tone of the city changed. The city that once bustled with ritual and trade became still, eerily still. Unless, of course, you happened to be an Aztec warrior. Then you weren't sleeping. You were listening, and what you heard would likely keep you awake. Tenochtitlan at night was not just a city of rest. It was a city that whispered. The wind snaked through the streets, catching the edges of stone temples and reed huts alike. It carried with it more than air, it carried memory. Screams, songs, cries of joy from drunk celebrants, cries of pain from sacrificial victims, cries of animals, gods, and Manafin, all sounding eerily alike. You might be sleeping near the edge of one of Tenochtitlan's many canals, lulled by the faint sound of water lapping against the causeway. But then a new sound cuts through, the haunting tune of a reed flute. A simple 5-note scale, repeated again and again. It drifts through the humid air like a ghost. Maybe it's a priest preparing for dawn's sacrifice. Or maybe it's a lost soul, doomed to wander the canal edges until the gods show mercy. You never know, but you hear it, and it keeps you up. Every warrior knew the night had to face as the day belonged to the emperor, the warriors, and the priests. But the night belonged to something else entirely. Old spirits, perhaps, or the living shadows of those who had died violently in ritual bloodshed. In Aztec belief, death was not the end, and many spirits remained connected to the mortal world, especially if their deaths had not been ... fully complete. In other words, if they had been sacrificed improperly, or if the ceremony had been botched, their spirits may not ascend. Instead, they lingered. In your dreams, in your ears, the wind, at night often mimicked these souls. Warriors would sometimes report hearing whispers near the great temple Tenochtitlan's towering step pyramid, known as the Templo Mayor. These whispers never made sense. They were fragments, half prayers, names, screams, sobs. One warrior reportedly heard his own name being chanted from the pyramid's summit. When he climbed up the next day to investigate, he found nothing but 3 drops of fresh blood on the stone where sacrifices were made. No one else had been there, at least, not during daylight hours. You slept lightly if, at all now. Imagine you're not just any citizen. You're a warrior, and you've seen these sacrifices up close. You've helped perform them. You've carried hearts still pulsing, watched eyes roll back as priests cut through ribs. These sights never truly leave you, especially not when it's dark. Your sleeping mat is rough and uneven. Your muscles ache from the weight of armor made from jaguar pelts and obsidian blades. The sounds of the city at night, frogs croaking, water shifting, distant drums don't soothe you. They stir something. You remember the man from last week, the one who tried to run from sacrifice. He'd made it almost to the temple base before the priests caught him. You can still hear his gasping. You were the one who helped tie him down, but what you hear isn't always what's there. Some warriors believed the gods tested them at night. Tezcatlipoca, the god of night, was especially known for this. He was a shadowy deity, half of his face obscured by black obsidian. He was powerful, feared, and unpredictable. At night, he might appear in your dreams, asking riddles. Or worse, he might whisper lies in your ears. Lies that seemed real, that your commander was planning to betray you, that your last offering had failed, that your time had come. Others believed the city itself could speak, that the canals had memory, that if you stared into the still waters at night, they'd show you something, your future, your fears, your past battles replayed with new, disturbing twists. Some warriors swore they saw their own deaths reflected in the water. Others saw relatives long dead, silently mouthing words they could not hear. Then there were the cries from the temple tops. Every warrior feared one specific thing at night, the cries. And not just any cries, but those that came from the top of the Templo Mayor. Sometimes you'd hear them as the moon rose high, wails that sounded too real to be imagined, but too distant to investigate. These were not cries of joy or drunken singing. They were pure pain. Some believed these were the souls of the sacrificed, repeating their final moments night after night. Others whispered darker theories, that some sacrifices were carried out at night in secret, offerings that weren't sanctioned by the emperor, but by rogue priests seeking forbidden power. There were even tales of blood flowing down the temple steps at night, vanishing by morning. Those who dared to climb and investigate sometimes returned, changed, quieter, haunted. One warrior, after climbing the steps alone at night on a dare, quit the ranks within a week. He refused to say what he saw. He moved far from the city. He would not sleep indoors anymore. Always near water, always holding obsidian for protection. Superstition became strategy because of all this. Sleep among Aztec warriors wasn't a simple matter. Rituals were adopted. Some warriors rubbed ashes from previous battles on their foreheads before bed, hoping it would ward off spirits. Others kept tokens from successful sacrifices under their mats, a finger bone, a feather, a drop of dried blood. Priests advised warriors to sleep facing east, toward the rising sun, so they wouldn't be consumed by the powers of the night. Still, many did not sleep at all. Not deeply, not safely. If you were lucky, you'd be stationed far from the temples, in the outer neighborhoods. There, the canals were quieter, the flute music more distant. But even then, dreams came. Dreams, filled with blood, sacrifice, and the ever-present eyes of gods you could never fully understand. The water wasn't always safe either. The canals that brought life to the city by day often seemed like gateways to another world by night. They glistened under the moonlight, and their calm surfaces seemed to still. Some claimed they'd seen hands reaching up from the depths, thin, bone-white fingers that vanished when touched. Others spoke of ghost canoes, boats that drifted, with no rowers, moving upstream against the current. If one passed by your home at night, you did not look. Not directly. That was considered an invitation. And if your home was too close to a canal, and you heard splashing at night, best not. To check, some warriors placed obsidian shards at their windows to keep bad spirits away. Others left food at the canal edges, hoping to satisfy whatever lurked beneath. Tenochtitlan at night was beautiful, but never peaceful from a distance. The city shimmered under the moon. The water reflected the stars. The pyramids stood silent and majestic. But this beauty masked a deeper current of restlessness. A city built on blood does not sleep quietly, and those who served its gods, its warriors, carried that burden into every night. You knew that if you were chosen for sacrifice, your cries might be the ones echoing from the temple tops tomorrow night. You knew that even if you survived battle after battle, your mind might still fall to pieces under the weight of restless dreams and whispered names. And so, you lay awake, eyes half shut, hand resting on your obsidian blade, listening to flutes in the dark, listening to footsteps that weren't quite footsteps, wondering if tonight the gods would visit, or if it was something older, something darker, something not meant to be remembered. You weren't just a warrior. You were a guardian of a city that could never rest. Not truly. Not ever. You're in a flower war. It's beautiful. It's poetic. It's also your final sunrise. Let's say you're standing quietly on a grassy field, somewhere in the Valley of Mexico. It's very early in the morning. The sun hasn't quite risen yet, but the sky is beginning to glow with a sleepy orange light. You are calm, but only on the outside, because today is a flower war, and you are the flower. No one tells you this directly, but everyone knows. The flower wars were not like normal wars, with conquest and destruction. They were more ceremonial, ritualized, deliberate. To city-states would agree, to meet on a chosen battlefield. They would bring warriors, they would bring drums, they would bring the gods, but no siege weapons, no armies destroying, villages, just warriors, fighting, one-on-one, not to kill, but to capture. And now, it's your turn. You've trained for this moment. You've painted your face with sacred pigments. You've tied on your quilted cotton armor, and you march into the sacred field. With the others, the drums begin. They beat slowly, then faster still, and then silence. Your opponent stands across from you. He's about your size. His shield glints in the morning light. His obsidian-edged weapon is raised, and so is yours. You circle, then you clash. Not once, not twice. Again and again. Your arms are heavy. Your heart is pounding. You're trying not to kill him. He's trying not to kill you. But if you mess up, even a little, if you stumble, if you trip, if your obsidian club lands in the wrong place, then the gods will get a different offering, Today is not your lucky day. You fall hard, and before you can rise, there are hands on you. They are binding your arms. Your weapon is gone. The battle is over, and you are the prize. Your opponent kneels beside you. He thanks you. Yes, he thanks you. Because capturing a warrior alive is a great honor. It proves bravery. It pleases the gods. And it earns him a better place in the next world. But you, you are now walking into another kind of ritual. You are taken back to his city. You are paraded through the streets. Some cheer, some watch quietly, some are just, waiting. You are not tortured. No, this is a sacred act. You are fed. You are painted again. You are dressed in feathers, and then, when the priest calls, you are led up the temple steps, one by one, higher and higher. The drums are beating again. The air is thin. You smell burning. Copal. You hear the wind whistling. Through the stone pillars, you reach the top. There is a slab. You lie on it. You do not struggle, because this was always the end. Your heart is still beating, and that's exactly what they need. The priest raises the obsidian knife, and the sun rises. The gods are fed. But let's rewind just a little. What exactly was a flower war, and why did the Aztecs agree to fight battles just to get prisoners? Well, it all starts with the gods. The Aztecs believed the sun needed strength to rise. Each day, it fought a cosmic battle in the sky, and each night, it died. The only way to help it return was with blood, specifically, the blood of brave warriors. The more honorable the warrior, the more valuable the offering. And so, to find those warriors, the flower wars were created. It was not about conquering land. It was about collecting strength in the form of living hearts. And yes, the captured warriors understood their fate. They even believed that dying this way granted them a special place in the afterlife. Warriors who died in battle or by sacrifice, were said to follow the sun. For 4 years after death, they would rise with the dawn and dance across the sky with the morning star. And after those 4 years, they would return to earth, as butterflies or hummingbirds, beautiful, peaceful, eternal. But knowing all this doesn't really make the experience easier. Not for you, not for your family. Your parents are probably weeping now. Your siblings may avoid your name, but still, they are proud, because you died. Not a criminal, not a peasant, but as an eagle warrior, or maybe a jaguar. You trained for years. You survived dozens of battles. You earned your feathers, and now, you earn your ending still. It sucked. It really did. You were just starting to get good. Maybe next time, would have captured someone else. Maybe earned another promotion, but now, you are ash. Smoke, a name carved into a temple wall. Your blood dripped into the sacred stone bowl. It trickled down the pyramid. The priests chanted your name, and when the sun rose, the people cheered, because you made it possible, but you never saw it. Just the sky, and then, nothing. So, if you're ever daydreaming about becoming a brave Aztec warrior, think twice. The fighting was brutal, the expectations were high, and the retirement plan, well, let's just say it involved a lot of stairs, and no way down, except one. The sun rises slowly over Tenochtitlan. The sky is not yet fully blue, but the golden light spills across the temple stones like honey on ancient bread. You wake up knowing what today is. The date has been circled in your head for weeks, maybe even months. There was a time when you could not imagine it. Now, it is here. The day you will meet the gods, not through prayer, but through the cut of an obsidian knife. You do not struggle. There is no shouting. That is not the Aztec way. You are calm. Almost too calm. The priest told you the gods admire silence more than screams. The gods feed on obedience, on dignity, on the smell of fresh blood and the rhythm of drums played by trembling hands. You walk with others young warriors like you, chosen for their bravery, for their skill in battle, for their willingness to become offerings. You are barefoot. The stone is cold beneath your feet. The path to the temple steps is lined with marigolds, their scent thick and almost sweet. People toss petals as you pass. Some cry, some pray, some watch in silence, holding their own breath, as if they too are climbing with you. The steps are steep. You do not look down. You focus on each stone beneath your foot. 1, 2, 3. The climb feels eternal. Your legs begin to burn. But you do not stop. No one ever stops. That would dishonor the sacrifice. At the top, the temple priests are waiting. They wear masks, some jaguar faces, some eagle beaks, others skulls painted white with black eyes. The main priest wears a cloak made of hummingbird feathers. It shimmers like water in the sun. His eyes do not blink. His face is unreadable. There is a stone altar. It is flat, smooth, and cold. It has been cleaned. Recently, the smell of blood lingers beneath the incense. You lie back upon it. Your arms are stretched outward. Your legs are bound with woven cord. The sky above you is a perfect blue. You can hear the drums below, rising in rhythm. The sound matches your heartbeat. Or maybe it's the other way around. The obsidian blade is dark, not silver, not shiny. It reflects nothing. The priest holds it with reverence. Obsidian is sacred than any metal. It is made of volcano glass. It is as old as the gods themselves. The blade will not hesitate. It does not falter. It never doubts. You are told this is an honor, that your death will feed the sun, that your heart, torn free and lifted high, will beat once more in the hands of a priest, that the gods will notice, that the drought may end, that the corn may end, that the corn may grow, that the city will live another year. But your thoughts are slower now. You begin to notice smaller things. The warmth of the stone beneath your back, the way the wind carries the scent of cooking maize from far below, the soft murmur of people chanting in unison, the way the priest's breath clouds slightly in the morning air. You wonder if he is nervous too. Probably not. The knife rises. You do not flinch. It begins not with pain, but with pressure. A strange, sudden weight in your chest, a tightness that you cannot move. Then the heat, then the sound, not your voice, but the thud of something inside you, pulling free. Something important, your heart. The priest lifts it high. The people below cheer. The drums grow louder. It is still beating. Just barely, just long enough to please the gods. Your body is still, lifeless. But it will not be discarded. You are not trash. You are sacred. Your flesh will be burned or buried with rites, or perhaps fed to the jaguar priests, as tradition allows. Not in disrespect, but in reverence. A sacred meal, a way of becoming divine through digestion. Below the temple, life continues. The market stalls reopen. The maize cakes bake. Children play in the canals. Fishermen cast nets. The city, massive and floating on water, breathes a little easier today, because the sun has been fed, and yet, the ritual is never done. One heart is never enough. The gods are always hungry. There will be another ceremony tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. This is how the world stays in balance. For the Aztecs, the end is never the end. Your blood joins the blood of 1,000 others. A river of red flowing down stone steps. A reminder of duty, of devotion, of death. It is quiet again. You are part of the silence, and in that silence, the gods smile. You're no longer resisting. There's a strange warmth in your chest, and it's not the sun. The obsidian blade gleams, sharp as the horizon, and moves faster than thought. Your back arches, then relaxes. The drums fade into a pulsars, or maybe the crowds. You can't tell anymore. They lift your heart to the sky, not metaphorically. Literally. The priests do this with reverence. You're one of dozens that day, maybe hundreds that week. A gift to the gods, one more beating heart among many. The Templo Mayor has seen countless sacrifices, just like yours. And yet, somehow, this moment feels personal. Sacred, even. You're not alone. Across the stone plaza, other warriors lie still, their hearts offered, their bodies cooling under the gaze of Tlaloc and Huitzilopochtli. The blood flows down the steps like a dark river, nourishing something older than conquest, older than myth. Historians still debate the exact numbers, how many were sacrificed, how often. Some say tens of thousands during festivals, others argue those figures are exaggerated, relics of Spanish propaganda. But the altars, the tools, the murals, they speak their own language. You're drifting now. The smoke of burning copal incense curls around your memory. The chants fade into whispers. Somewhere, A conch shell blows one final time, and then dash silence. No pain, just peace. Your journey as an Aztec warrior is over. Whether your name will be remembered or forgotten, whether your spirit will rise with the sun or dissolve into the soil, no one can say for sure. But for tonight, you can rest. You've earned it. Let your mind go still. Breathe softly. No more war, no more drums. Just sleep. End of script. Sweet dreams.